Okay, we're going to go ahead and start. Meeting is in session. Call to order. And starting with Mayor's opening remarks, we just have a pretty busy agenda tonight, and we have a lot going on in town, which you will be hearing about. And on that basis, I'm looking for approval of agenda.
Second.
Okay, all in favor then? We got it unanimous, because you're there. Okay, so I should have said we are starting this meeting with 3 council members present, which does equate to a quorum. So we're able to hold this meeting and have votes. Okay, approval of minutes from October 21st. Everybody okay with them?
Oh, we're talking about 11/4/19 Rotary Avenue, the swale at 11/4/19 Rotary Avenue in Kensington. Is that considered Kensington? Oh, sorry, this is on the last page, page 3 of the minutes. I think it's...
Last year?
No,
Yeah. That's Josh Simon's house. And that's,
Right.
It's on,
Yeah.
it's on the other side.
And is that, what is it considered Kensington?
His
Because
Mailing address.
mailing address, okay, not whether.
majority of his property is in.
Okay. Otherwise, I'm not.
Any other changes or?
No.
Okay, we good? All right, everybody's okay with the minutes?
All right.
Without changes, so that's unanimous. Ready? Thank you. Okay, do we have any presentations by residents this evening? Okay, we'll just move on. We have several action items. So the first one is the adoption of the ordinance to reflect the additional 100% SHA funded grant modification. You'll recall that last council meeting, the council, we introduced the ordinance, and the council approved the introduction, so now we're at the point of adopting, unless it is everybody in favor? Okay, thank you. What they say generally is if it's unanimous, but we did have made the first motion, and I think I'll second it. You seconded, sorry. But okay. And now we have the appointment of Mr. Malcolm Russell Einhorn to the Archives Committee. And I think council has did they receive a hard copy written expression of interest, or was it just by email? Okay. So if you've gotten a chance to read the email, Malcolm comes pretty highly experienced and with great interest. His background is in history. He went to Yale. I think he majored in that. So he is a lover of history, and he's a new resident. Needs to be one.
Yeah,
Just didn't ask for
That's
personal ones.
right.
You have to be a year to be on a town committee that is set by ordinance.
So I'm going to put that check into the file.
All right, so what just occurred to me is Mr. Russell Einhorn is a new resident. They moved into Waverly, on Waverly. And I believe to be appointed to a town committee that is set by ordinance, committee members have to have been at least 1 year as a resident. But we will check that. So we are not at this point going to ask for, I'm not going to be asking for council approval of the appointment until we're sure. We want to just appoint and then back up, but it's okay. So my apologies on that, but I believe we ran into that one other time. Okay.
I just wondered, I don't know if there's any precedent for it, but is there the ability for Mr. Einhorn to serve in an advisory non-voting capacity until he meets the 1 year requirement?
So under the charter, under the ordinance, committees that have been established by code in the town are allowed to have outside experts, but they have to be non-resident. But I thought you were going to go somewhere else.
Oh, okay. Which was?
Maybe like a volunteer, he can sit in. I mean, it's sort of like, what do you know what I'm saying?
Like auditing a class.
Right, exactly.
That's kind of what I-
Why don't we first establish whether you can get bond or not, or is eligible?
Oh, well, we don't even have to, we don't put this in law. I'm just saying, we can give,
Yeah,
we can preface it to him.
just need to discourage a volunteer.
Absolutely. So we will check into whether, we'll check into the ruling of that provision, if that really is true. On 1 year residency in town before being appointed to a town committee.
Is this considered to be an administrative function?
Yeah, we'll check into that. Yeah, is that okay?
Well, yeah, no, the reason I'm asking is because then we can always do the vote and ratify it later.
You mean do the vote now and then ratify it?
No, we did an administrative function for, I think it was for Jerry Lewis, so we could do the same sort of thing now. Well, later, once you figure it out, it turns out that there's no residency requirement, then we can just do an administrative
Appointment.
appointment.
Yes, this
So
is
it's just,
true. It is an administrative appointment.
so I'll just, you send us an email,
Okay. So we'll do our research.
Right.
And we'll let you all know.
Right.
And then if he isn't, if that requirement is there, we will just reach out to him. Andrea can reach out to him because she's working with the archives and the archivist to say, you're still welcome to attend, just sort of as an interested resident.
Right.
Because they're always welcome to meet this requirement. Okay, so tell me follow up.
Correct.
Okay, we have the discussion and approval of town's position on the county's small cell, it's the county council's small cell tower bill, known as ZTA 19-07. It's for telecommunication towers, actually limited use. And I've asked council members Phil Schultz and Jerry Lee Bennett will kind of give us the highlights. And I've asked Phil to start us off because he's more familiar with this than Jerry Lee at present. So Phil, are you
Okay,
ready?
so basically what they want to do here is they want to do a zoning text amendment to allow the county to regulate with certain provisions the placement of small cell towers within the county. And what this means is that they've broken it up into various areas that have to do with the zoning. So for instance, if we look at like R90 or something like that, we'll see that for telecommunications towers, there's a limited use and conditional use, meaning that it has to be approved by a hearing examiner. And so in some cases, it's essentially a permitted use, means it could be permitted, but there really aren't any here. It's mostly limited conditional use and so what they did was they took the existing text that dealt with towers in general, and they added and deleted certain things. And this is basically, it's called Section 2, Division 59-3.5, and the Division 3.5 commercial uses, Section 3.52 communication facility. And so they talk about various things that they do various additions and deletions. Well, the problem with this is that they essentially the county essentially grabs all the authority on a cell tower, the ability to permit cell towers, and holds it themselves. So we really have little that we can do about it. To make things even worse, what they've done is they've said that you can quote unquote batch permits, meaning that you can take a group of permits as long as they're within 3,000 feet of each other, and you've got, as long as the site's within 3,000 feet, and as long as they're basically the same sort of thing, you can take them and batch them together, and they can go through one hearing. So to give you an example, 3,000 feet is a little over half a mile. So that would mean that basically this will work out about 1 square mile. So you could take all the cell towers you can fit in 1 square mile, throw them all together, and then that would become just one hearing, a hearing exam. And just using, for instance, 2 ways of looking at it. I looked at it, for instance, that they would be spaced 500 feet apart. And 500 feet apart, you could put as many as 110 different sites under one hearing. And you could, for instance, cover pretty much all of Garrett Park in one hearing by just having them site one tower and say, across the tracks or over here at Parkway. And we would be pretty much out of it. There wouldn't be a lot to do about it because they would just go through the batch hearing and it would be done. And in addition, the hearing examiner, for instance, doesn't even have to listen to the standard county planning department staff. As it says, you can look through this, but basically what it says here is the hearing examiner may request information, or of course may not. It's on page 11. And probably one of the ones that becomes the most touchy is actually on page 12, where it says the hearing examiner determines that additional height and reduced setbacks. If the hearing examiner determines that additional height and reduced setbacks are needed to provide service, or reduce setback or increase height and allow support structure to be located somewhere else. But basically what it says, the hearing examiner gets to determine if I want to make it taller or if I want to make it closer. And it even goes so far as to say the hearing examiner may reduce the setback requirement to at least 30 feet or increase the height from the 60 feet that everybody sees advertised. So what this means to us is that you might as well just call it 30 feet because if the person decides that, well, it's expedient to make it 30 feet, then that's what they're going to do. And so it's one more thing where, we don't have a say in it. And, it's basically something, it's up to the hearing examiner. And even the hearing examiner, for instance, can make a motion to actually to make a motion to batch all these things. The hearing examiner can limit the amount of debate on the subject. although they have to give equal time, but they still can limit the amount of debate. They can limit the number of people who are discussing the issue to, say, one person per group, per side, if you will. And so when you look at the whole thing, it's really not, it's not very good for us as a small town, because essentially what can happen is telecom can just go to the hearing examiner and say, hey, this is what we want. They plop a batch of the stuff on the table. Because the FCC still has the old shot clock, which you might remember me talking about last summer, that means they have a certain amount of time to get this done, and by default, it's approved.
Oh,
So the hearing examiner is probably not going to be too happy, the county's not going to be too happy wanting, to entertain having other groups get in the middle of it, because that just eats up time on that clock, and they can be stuck by default with something, or telecoms can go after them for things.
so we're stay focused on this.
So for that reason, it's not a good idea. Now, from what I understand, Mark Elrich is opposed to this, which is a good thing, because everybody's looking to get together with the county planning staff and with Mark to try and come up with a more sensible alternative. In addition, Councilmember Hucker, Katz, and Friedson are also all opposed. So we don't know about Javando or Glass, but at least there's 3 people who are opposed, plus the county, Mark Elrich. So I think that helps a lot. Now I know that Jerry Lee, Kathy, and I all worked on taking a letter that Somerset had put together and tweaking that a bit to make it a little more directed towards Garrett Park. And that we've got, I think you just handed a copy of that out today. It was on
Council members have that in front of you.
our desk. And the nice thing was Somerset brought up all these points, plus a few others. They didn't emphasize the one about being able to stick 100 cell sites on the one batch, but the way I look at it is these guys, that 3,000 foot was picked for a reason. I think it's picked so that they can go around in every square mile, they can basically start plopping in applications. And it'll just be a one-shot deal. But unfortunately, it could overrun Garrett Park just by virtue of the fact that somebody else will say Greater Rockville. They want to put a site in Greater Rockville, they can now overrun Garrett Park with whatever they want.
Can we ask some questions, Phil?
Yep.
Just to recall for some of the council members, you may remember back in December, maybe it was November, we had to pass an ordinance to get ourselves on the books, and I apologize, I don't know the exact date.
We had to be on January 14th.
Well, yeah, but we had to do it ahead, right? So-
We had to be done, we had to have the ordinance done by January 14th.
So it was January the past?
Yeah.
Maybe? Okay. And not only did we discuss some of the concerns we had for, the aesthetics and the distance of towers from one to another, we also talked about the canopy and the height, because what we knew at the time was for these towers to be efficient in their delivery of 5G, they have to be sort of in sight line, about 200 feet. I know I've seen something for 300, but given that we had such a great, wonderful canopy, we've been concerned that it might create clustering,
Yes.
where then the poles get actually closer in order to be able to be efficient to transmit. So where this bill is going, and I think we started to talk about some ways of trying to restrict or to oversee the placement of the poles. What this bill is doing is taking away our ability to actually have oversight once the pole is even in place. And, if it's, I can't remember, and maybe this is where you're going, with a certain amount of square footage, that if it's in that certain square footage, the county's taking a pass on coming and looking at individual pole placements, which means we can't really ask for these poles, hey, you didn't abide by your application and you've exceeded your the limitations. Is
Well,
that correct?
Basically, yes. There was essentially like a pilot project, if you will, that was done back in 2018, and there's a nice article written in the Montgomery County Civic Federation newsletter in February, which there was a hotline for that. If you had the stuff that came from Somerset, it mentioned something about page 15, and it turns out this is the article for it.
There's something from Baltimore too, is that?
I believe so, but this was at least the one that I saw was good because it applied here to Montgomery County. And the real problem that they have here is that everybody agreed to, oh yes, this is the permit, this is where we're going to do it, and all that stuff. And then the telecos went and they put a taller pole in and they stuck it in a different location. And people complained and the county did nothing. It was like, okay, it's there, it's planned, too bad. And this is a big problem.
Yeah, and the draft CTA does not really include any enforcement mechanisms, which is very troubling, and that's something that we put in our
That's
draft
right.
letter.
Thank you. That's right. Then I have one point of question that's more specific, and I draw you to page 12, section 2, subsection 6 or whatever it's called. And it's really the question of what defines conditional use versus limited use, because I'm going to read this to you all. It says, the hearing examiner may not approve a conditional use if the use abuts or confronts an individual resource or is in a historic district in the master plan or preservation. What would that include also? And I don't know the difference on conditional or limited. So do we have a little bit more say?
Yeah, a little bit, but I think what this basically says is it has to be in the county's master plan for historic preservation. So some part of this is listed, not all.
Right, say that again, somewhat, for the town.
For the
right?
town, part of the town is listed under the master plan, but not all of the
Not
town
all,
is listed.
right.
And that's the
We might need to get that clarified.
And the other thing is, and it may just be English in my interpretation of English, but may not approve. So that, to me, makes it optional, as if I could approve it regardless.
Right. And
I
then
mean,
once
depends on which word you emphasize.
Right. Do I,
Right.
I mean, it doesn't say shall not approve,
Right.
it just says may not approve.
Yes.
So to me, that
That's
it has some wiggle room in it.
Again, once it's there, it's pretty hard to try to have it removed or replaced or,
Right.
relocated.
Timing wise, I did want to mention that this is actually being considered and possibly voted on tomorrow. So we do need to act quickly if we want to get the mayor's letter sent to the county.
Right, so I think, you're right, Jerry Lee, they have a hearing tomorrow. I don't think the vote is expected until later in the month or December. But the hearing is tomorrow, which is where you get the actual ears of the county council, which is why we wanted to join with Somerset. I believe Tacoma Park is also
Tacoma Parks also wanted to, yeah.
taking opposition and sending a letter. So I go back to you and Phil and Jerry Lee on next steps in this discussion. Anybody else?
Are there any questions about the draft letter or? any-
Is it substantially the same as what was sent by Somerset, or would you read by it like it says, oh, here's another one of that?
I think we changed it
You
enough.
changed enough, yeah.
To make it look like
We changed the opening a little bit and a few things in between, so it's not the same letter, just territory based.
And this would also go forward, would go forward as documentation for testimony. It would be put in the hearing record as further testimony, not just a letter to President Zimmerman.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's exactly the same is the supporting documentation. The front page, the letter itself is actually, it's been, we follow the same basic thoughts, but it's been changed significantly.
We do have to add a sentence in the letter to request that the letter become part of the hearing record. So I'll get the right language and put that in.
Is there any benefit to getting together with Tacoma Park and, between Tacoma Park and with Somerset and any other municipality that feels like so inclined to do something jointly?
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, we kind of are by virtue of the fact that we're doing this letter. And we've got at least the hearings tomorrow. I mean, we may follow up more later on, but for right now, with the hearing being tomorrow, and we're using the same basic idea.
And Somerset has also offered to state for the record tomorrow that they are going. I'm sorry, it's in the evening tomorrow. I'm now working at Barnes & Noble part-time. So I cannot attend, and Jerry Lee and Bill Russell can. So the mayor from Somerset will be speaking and is offering to state for the record that Tacoma Park and Garrett Park are also supporting his
Does it make
testimony.
logical sense to see if Ron Polk could attend on our behalf?
For all I know, he may be. I can tell you there is a great cross-town, cross-municipal committee that is pushing this. This is being directed out of Somerset.
Somerset's actually, and they've
But
engaged
they're
around
working
a lot
across
of this,
the county with, so they've got a real working group going. These aren't one-offs, this is really coordinated.
Yeah,
Well, it'd be nice if we could be considered part of that.
We are,
we are,
and this is how we got started last
year.
Yeah.
Good.
So,
Yes, Sean.
And just for the purposes of.
did you want to form a plan?
You can if you like, I mean, we're not doing something with a resolution, we're just approving them, so.
Could you just remind me what the nature of the what was passed back in January was? Was it an ordinance or was it just for purposes of writing that ordinance? It was an ordinance?
An
Yeah.
ordinance, yeah.
It is
But it was
on,
also at that point an FGC ruling, which was subsequently withdrawn.
It was an ordinance for the town
For the
to
town,
address some of the aesthetic and
And maintenance issue.
maintenance issues, since our, since our code is very limited and really outdated on any telecommunications.
And that was passed and everything?
Yes,
Yes.
that was all passed, the council approved and adopted.
on the website.
So,
So are we all in agreement with the letter being sent with the additional sentence about requesting this be part of the record?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for your work, Jerry Lee and Phil, on this. We really appreciate it.
I'll go this side.
Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of a resolution on the Montgomery County Debris Management Plan. Town Manager Fox is going to walk us through that.
Sure, so I think most of the information is in the resolution language, but I'll just sort of walk through that. So the county implements a debris management plan as part of their emergency operations plan. And this resolution is to request authorization for the town to become a signatory to an MOU with the county that would enable the town to use the provisions of the county's debris management plan to remove the debris that results from a significant disaster or hazard that has been declared an emergency. The town would then be eligible for reimbursement from FEMA and could piggyback on the county's contracts with debris management contractors. I think it's important to point out that the town would pay the county a disposal fee for the debris and for certain circumstances for ancillary county staff time. So for example, there'll be a debris management site, there'll be monitors at that site, the town would be part of the group of folks that are on this MOU paying for that person's time, for example. Ron Bull, our town contract attorney, provided the resolution language, and then based on emails that I've received or been on, it appears the other Chevy Chase area towns have either already signed the MOU or will be signing it. When I asked the representative at the county if we signed on to this last iteration of this 8 years ago or something, the person I talked to wasn't sure, so I don't have that information, but in looking through all the materials, it seems pretty straightforward.
Andrew, do we have any idea what costs we might be talking about if such a occurrence happens and we have to pay something?
No, it talks about how, in the actual MOU language, it talks about how the estimated disposal fee and then the ancillary fee would be established at the time of the declaration of emergency, varied depending on the severity of the event, and then based on the tipping fees. There's something, it might be in the actual language of the plan, but there's something about proportional.
Right, they are, they're based on the amount of debris that we generate, so.
So it's a formula.
Right,
It's an actual
It would
measure
be an
of
actual
the debris
measure.
inclusive. To
Right.
me, it seems
exactly.
totally fair, right?
Right, we'd have to make sure our own maintenance crew monitored and kept track of the,
So cost is
the
formulated.
ticket, as they call them, yeah.
Yep.
I'll just say it's a really good idea to have a good debris management plan, and to have very good record keeping.
Yep.
If there is the opportunity to get federal reimbursement, because they are very picky about the record keeping and documentation.
Yes, I just had another thought on this, and it's not putting anyone on the spot. It's more, how do we get, if a lot of the debris is in the right-of-way along the train tracks, which is actually owned by CSX, where's the leverage for them, to clean that up?
Well, so
You know?
part of this is that we would have to clear our own roadways, but then
Yes.
they would help us clear from certain locations. For CSX, I think it would be the same, like when the tree fell on July 21st, and I called their hotline or whatever at 11 o'clock at night, and I don't think it was clear till the next morning.
Right, but we still have all that
debris.
wood,
Yeah, yeah.
all sitting there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered.
Well, for them, I mean, all they're interested in is getting the line.
The train's going,
The
What'd you
train's
say?
going, all they're interested
Yeah,
is getting the
I know,
trains
but-
going. So
but-
it's a fellow on the track, we're going real fast.
Yeah,
Well, also due to resident Chuck Berry, who went and helped clear some of that initially, even before the trains got there. He was out there.
So I don't remember the specifics, but there are some provisions in the plan. I looked at it today about dealing with certain private property, and there are some provisions for the town and the county to, in certain cases, clear debris from private property if necessary. So that the fifth, I assume CSX right away is privately operated, if not owned. So there might be some possibility there, but I'm not sure.
the area where I could see that might come into play would probably be the train station.
Either what?
Train station.
Yeah, especially if it was impeding traffic or causing health and safety hazard.
The CSX Roadmaster was apparently out here 2 weeks ago, but apparently not in the right location. So something was cleared, but not very nice.
Oh, gosh.
That's tomorrow.
Are there any other questions, anything more for discussion?
It seemed clear, it didn't seem reckless to not participate. So I think it's good that you're on it.
So if there's no further discussion, Would you like to have a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Well, that's done. Thank you.
Is it open for this?
December 6th.
Okay, there is no new business unless somebody on the council suddenly or recently just thought of something that they'd like to bring up as new business. Of course, you weren't here, Dan, in case there was something on the agenda you wanted to add, so feel free now. You're good. Okay, so we are going to move on to town updates. I want to talk briefly about the Safe Routes to School project, which we all know is happening. It's very busy. So you may have heard already that we are going to have a sample of the concrete with the color taupe poured tomorrow, and they're supposed to be coming around noon. And I believe it's about a 5 by 5 foot slab, and it's going to be in the swimming pool parking lot. And we thank the the swimming pool board for allowing that use. And the swimming pool parking lot is also the initial staging area for mobilization. And with the agreement that we made with the swimming pool board that we would not go beyond May 1st. So just so everybody knows, that will get cleared out by May 1st next year. So the pouring is tomorrow. Looking forward to that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
My experience with stuff like that is that it makes sense to have more than one color poured. Because you'll be surprised when you see something especially in the sunlight, how light it actually looks, as opposed to looking at something that's in the shade. And you get much better perspective if you have multiple pours of different colors, so that you can say, that's definitely not going to work. This one is possible, that looks about like the best to me. So if it's not too late, I would strongly urge that we look at more than one color or tinting. Because my sense is that most people in town would like to be on the dark side of it to make it as least to make it as unintrusive as possible when we pour new concrete.
So I would like to add to that, and I absolutely agree with the conditions that can change, whether it's more wet or always under direct sun exposure. This was the color that was placed in the specs before my time. Taupe was the decided color, and upon looking at the sample brochure, this is far darker than what originally people were thinking, like linen. So we just went ahead with it. Yeah, we are not trying to incur any costs, and they're pouring tomorrow. It's a little darker. It will look like, in my mind, I don't know, Andrea may have a thought on this, but in my perspective, it looks like it would be like wet sand, wet, dirty sand to me. That's kind of the color of the taupe in the brochure. So, anyway, we were going with it because that's what was decided well before me. But I was happy to see, Hans, that it was taupe and not linen, because early on I thought I was told that it was linen, so I was relieved. So when I saw linen, I thought, oh, there is linen as a sample color, and that's very much more white and bright.
Will it be essentially a comment period on this, or is it just real?
I mean, there's
Well, you have to let it dry.
Right, sure.
There's, drying, it has to cure for at least 48 hours, and then they like 5 days of drying time at least. I mean, they would like even more than that. But, unless we absolutely don't like it, and I'm not trying to slow anything down, that's where we're going. But obviously, ponds, take a look. If it really bothers you, but I'm trying not to make changes like that. Anything that would create time delay or cost. So, I mentioned things are moving fast, and they are. This Friday, or this Thursday, the possibility starts of mobilization. When you get down to what that actually means for us right now with this weather, it really means getting subs on site to be looking at the route and, just analyzing things. Typically, it also means bringing in the big trucks and machinery, but they're not going to do that right away. But it's called mobilization, and that could start as early as Thursday. Also, starting as early as Thursday, and there's a little wiggle room. We do not have a set schedule yet, and I'll get to that in a minute for why. So I'm just sort of giving you a preliminary of what's coming. Some things I don't think will change, and I don't think these will change, what I'm talking about right now. Also starting as possibly as early as Thursday will be notifications to town residents that we will begin. And it could wait, depending, Patriot will be sending these out. And that would go anywhere from, Thursday until next week, next Wednesday, depending, But that's kind of how close all this is.
What method of notification?
They said they were sending letters. I don't know. We will find out more on that. But that's a good question. And I'm sure the town is going to be helping with this because we want to make sure everybody's reached and informed. So whatever we can help Patriot with, we're going to be right there. The stakeout and tree removal may be starting as early as the 11th of December. Now, right now, preliminarily, we are looking now at starting Oxford first because it has less issues than we thought. Then we go to Claremont, starting up at Strathmore, coming down to Montrose. And then concurrently, the outfall in Porcupine Woods will also be worked on. That's the stabilization with riprap and reinforced stone wall. Then Kenilworth. It's different subs involved and different machinery involved so they can do this concurrently. Where this puts us, however, preliminarily, is a schedule of 238 days. If you all recall, the IFB stated 150 days, calendar days. We do have a clause in there, a provision of liquidated damages at $250 per day for every day beyond that contract period where the work is not completed. So we're in a situation right now where we'll be discussing a change order with Patriot and with SHA because we know with the weather, we know we're going to have what everybody is already saying is it's going to be more snow this winter and colder temperatures, both of which will impact the schedule of this project. You can't do you can't do hand root excavation if the ground is frozen. It's a different thing when you want to just bring in an excavating machine and just go right through it. And we have a lot of areas with hand root excavation. So we're looking at, and Andrea and I have talked about this, I've talked about it with SHA, I've talked about it with Patriot, as well as with our civil engineer, Clark Azar, to sort of, to get into a negotiation where we perhaps would allow the extended schedule, we really have no choice, but only because it's conditioned on weather impact and delay.
Is there
So,
a force majeure clause?
Yeah, don't they probably have that anyway?
can you explain that?
Force majeure is basically acts of God, it's weather, it's storms and the like.
Right, and there is that already, but we've been told by SHA, because we have the specific 150, and they're showing 238, that we would have to go back and have a change order. It's a good point, because we already have that clause.
Right.
So, but you can already see how it's mapped. It was one thing if they were to start in June, which is where we thought we would be, and they pretty much would be able to have mapped it out. You can see in this preliminary schedule already that it's going in well beyond.
But I'm just curious, did they map it out with like 3-day work weeks and missing weeks as if those were like theoretical weather
No,
work stoppages?
no, they're just giving these long ranges. So for example, 40 days to do Oxford. Now that might get shortened or lengthened depending on the weather and how fast things are moving.
So I think the usual contract approach that we'd be thinking is hold them to the original schedule, and then when they have force majeure exemptions, there's actually bad weather, they submit that, you approve it, and that adds 1 day at a time to their 150. But I haven't seen a case where you change it in advance to proactively give them time. They should have a mechanism that they get to add 1 day at a time for every bad weather day.
Just off the very well.
Yeah, and there's generally, again, I haven't obviously looked at the contract, but I think that's a pretty standard approach, right? Phil?
That's
Pretty much.
So, yeah, the approach I would take.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty much
That's good input, and I will have that discussion. SHA already having reviewed the preliminary has already said, if you're going to, just by the way they're mapping this whole thing out, so I don't know what takes 40 days, it's just sort of a period of time, whether they're already accounting for weather delays or not. So it's a really good point, and I'll take this back to them.
Right, because I think the question you need to ask is it 40 days assuming, or whatever, the whole thing, 238, assuming that you had reasonably good weather the whole time, or did they build in delays for bad weather? Because if they built in delays for bad weather, then when there's force majeure, they should be able to just go back, take all those delays out, push the schedule back to something, and then
Then
just
it's sort of an artificial schedule, but.
Well, not really, because you're gonna claim those days as you go along, but if you don't, like you said, you go on to change order and a bunch of other jazz order.
Although I'm not really like arguing the point, because I agree with you all. I'm just seeing going forward the administrative hassle of every day. And this is sort of allowing them that endpoint with the inclusion that there is no additional incurred cost. Like if they stop work for 3 weeks because of snow, or a month because of snow, and they take their machine, their equipment away in trucks, and then they remobilize again, that cost is on them. You see? So,
Well, what this does is basically allows them to relieve from liquidated damages, essentially.
except that we're also, we would be saying you cannot charge us for the additional remobilization or stop.
I mean, you have to look at the clause, because all the clauses are written differently. I mean, I've seen ones written various ways, so you have to look and see exactly what they give for exemptions, what you're allowed to do, and so forth.
Okay.
That's the most about what this does. If it starts to get cold, they will be able to get asphalt, and asphalt will be needed all along, not for this main project, but for the edging, where the new curve is going to be put in. And that requires asphalt. Are you just going to put the asphalt in on hold and do it as a backfill order at the end of the project, or are they going to do this? They may not be able to buy asphalt. We've had lots of times had the experience where the asphalt plants just close starting in October, November, depending on cold, because I'm sure by now they're closed around here. So we need to have that discussion and understanding how we're gonna handle that.
And did there anyone propose just waiting till spring? I realize that's a
State highway did.
State highways did. And our response, aside from the fact that nobody's looking to become responsible for a delay or a potential delay. So let's set that aside, I mean, is that a reasonable thing to do? Only because like, you know, you watch these projects like in Holy Cross here that stretch on for like, you know, you do 6 days of work in over 6 months. It's super unpleasant. So if they're already saying, well, this 150-day contract is gonna be 240 days because of the weather, well, maybe we should start it later and actually do it in 150 days. And I don't know enough, I'm just raising the question.
Although you could look at it in a different way, which is there are more people out walking during the summer and spring. And so it's actually going to be more disruptive. And to do it during pool season
Right.
and during the time when most residents are out and about. Yes, there are the dog walkers and those of us who commute year round, but I think it will actually be less disruption during the winter months to do this.
Yeah, that's a very big point.
Life.
And as much as everybody says there's gonna be lots of snow, and so I'm pretty sure nobody's ever actually figured out how to know what the weather is. I don't think. So. Go for it, but I would not let them off the hook proactively on a 150-day contract.
I'll take that under advisement, as I was advised by Jason slightly differently. SHA actually just said, well, you're gonna have to do a change order. So I'll find out more nuance about are they factoring in already the time delays? What I'm trying, and you all may see this more clearly than me, but what I'm trying to avoid is we're gonna have a lot of administrative requirements, and we've got a great team in the office that are all getting ready to do this. But, you know, if for every day past 150, you know, at some point, and I think it's realistic, that we're gonna have to come to some agreement where we'll say, okay, you get another 30 days, because I don't want to be doing things like this every day, making a change or an MOU.
Depends on how your LDs are set up, because if they're, you know, I don't know how that, you'd have to pass it around, I guess, how that would work.
Say the LDs, define.
Liquidated damages.
Oh, right. Yeah, it just says it's a fairly brief statement, provision in the IEP. It just says 150 days, $250 daily for every day beyond the period.
The difference between 150 and 238 just sounds huge to me.
Say 88 days.
It's like a 30% sum of, I mean, it just seems like
It's 3 months.
you bid the job at 150 days, that's what your contract is.
Right,
So-
and they thought at the time it was going to be in June, as we all did.
So are they citing basic conditions of the temperature of the ground and things like that, or the weather?
No, it's not, it isn't, you know, it hasn't been written. It's just, you know, we're doing administrative discussion, reviewing schedules, and, you know, we're aware that you've got 238 days, you know, so we'll be talking with them more specifically. There's nothing that says due to weather, you know, or ground temperature.
Well, I think if we're going to do this review, they need to give us a specific reason why.
Oh, no, absolutely, we'll be talking with them about that.
So this is good. That's good.
And they're ready, they're starting to rock and roll. Okay, so that's, I think, all I have on Safe Process School for now. Definitely appreciate that input. And I'll be talking with them about that.
Great.
Okay.
Communications?
Thank you. Councilmember Simons, would you give us an update on that, please?
Yeah, sure. So we've had some discussions with Dan Devise and Mayor Kaki and the Communications Committee, and I think just to sort of sum it up, the focus is getting the town directory, which I will refer to as kind of directory and inclusive of the town email list. That's really the focus of the advisory committee right now. We've been thinking about the most efficient way to do that with streamlining the login, the portal, understanding the technology in the back end, how the database is accessed, maintained, and managed or administered, so that we can really get probably what I think is like, sort of 100% participation, so that all the addresses in town are there, we know who's who, and there's an email list, people can opt in, opt out, etc. So that's the focus, is to streamline that and to make and to find a way to clearly communicate that there's a difference between the town administered directory and associated email list and other neighborhood listservs like the Yahoo or now switched to .io, I think, the neighborhood listserv. So that's really what the focus will be, just to streamline and clean up and organize the town system and make sure that everybody knows that that's different from the listserv, which reaches a much broader audience than just the town of Garrett Park.
Can I clarify that we're talking also within the town, there's still the GPML list for town notifications, town office notifications, council committee notifications, and then we're talking also about this more inclusive, resident-inclusive forum, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I see that as the end result will essentially be a town directory that townsfolk can utilize to communicate, and then that the town can use to formally or officially communicate, official town news. But essentially, that backend database would be one thing. Just the access and the utilization of it could be tiered for just citizens in town versus official town notifications.
Who manages it?
So I would say the town office manages it. With my suggestion that the town needs some additional resource, such as an intern, to actually get it. There's a lot of admin work here, I think, get it set up and organized, and so I think that's going to require some additional resource. Whether we call that an intern or contract job for some amount of
I
time.
thought I even heard maybe a student with SSL hours.
That's
Because at some point later on for maintenance, for new subscribers or new residents, somebody has to be able to.
Yeah, so it could be, so I think the town office will in perpetuity be responsible for it, but could have a recurring system of engaging a student for SSL hours every spring or summer to do an
To clean up
upgrade,
the
a
list.
town refresh, et cetera. Because as we know, the database is only as good as it is managed and, kept up. So that's the current plan. I think there's some technology to figure out in the background. It's not a complicated topic, but nor is it simple. And so we do need a little bit of a flow chart and understanding access and figuring out what the back end tech is, making sure we have sensible security and making sure that when an official town notice goes out, it's clearly marked that this is coming from an official town source versus this is just coming from someone in town using it as a bulletin board. So we want to accomplish both of those functions. So that's what we're working on.
Is the group also looking at a way for people to opt out of, especially the unofficial notifications?
Yes, so I think we'll try to avoid there's like 15 different buckets to opt in and opt out of. And so, in its simplest form, I think we might say like, if you're in, you're going to get the official town notifications, you can't opt out of that. If you want to opt out of that, just don't be in it. But if you don't want the emails from the town folk, then I think that's probably opt out. at least what I'm gonna advocate for is that we don't try to segment it from like, if you're interested in trees, and if you're interested in sidewalks, and if you're interested in hairstyles, you know, like all these different tags, and it's too much.
Actually, no.
Would it be best to have just have one for everybody regardless in case there's an emergency? Not allow people to opt out of, say, certain official notices?
I think so, that's why I think like, I mean, someone could just refuse to provide an email address, but if you provided an email address, I think you would be always opting into, let's just say, at a minimum, the mayor's official communication, which would include town emergencies, which email's not really an emergency mechanism, but, and then I think the other stuff is opt-outable. But I think what we don't want to do is create too many layers.
Right, no, I agree with that. I was just thinking if we should all but require people to provide an email address just for dissemination of information.
Emergencies? Or, like you
Emergencies.
said, it's not really.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not sure we can
That's a
actually.
question. Yeah,
But I'm with you, I'd like to make it the de facto, this is how it's done in town. And if you live here, you're in the town directory, and you can provide an email address to the town. And then for, you know, some folks from a privacy standpoint, maybe there's someone out there that doesn't email or wants to be reclusive, fine. I don't think we can force anybody.
No, probably not. Probably not.
So right now, you know, we only have about 138 or so people, 138 or so residents, and this was maybe a few months ago, I last counted, that actually receive emails from the website. So the Garrett Park mail list, the GPML, you know, has over 500, for example. Or some of them are out of date, but
So we
that
need to
shows you just how.
we need to merge these things, get it into one
And they are
thing.
now all in the GPML, but that just shows you, and that's been the challenge, I think, for the town office, is, you know, people are not willing to give the email address. I mean, we don't have a lot of people with email addresses, and even for those that are in there, this number of 130 some is all there is.
And that's why I think if we have an intern or a contractor and we go after it with a serious communications plan, and, you know, there's, I mean, how many houses in town? 400, 361. So it's really not an insurmountable task by any means to put postcards in 360 doors, to put postcards in 360 PO boxes, to do one round of follow-up, to try to get some participation. So I don't think we'll get to 100%, participation, but it wouldn't surprise me if we get to, north of 85 or something. I figure a few towns are occupied, a few folks don't email, a few folks don't care, but for the most part, with the maybe a layered ask, I think we get the participation we need, and then if we do a good job and the communication is useful, people will be glad to have the communication. If the communication is useless or annoying, people will opt out and not participate.
There's some more packages.
I mean, look, everybody is getting multiple emails every day from Amazon letting them know the package is almost here, and the package is even closer, and the package is arrived.
Picture of your door.
So, right, I'm at your door, here I am. So, I think most folks, from the fact they see the Amazon truck at every single house, including mine, I think people are emailing, is my take.
So actually, one of the things worth mentioning here is that even currently now, everybody has the ability to actually have a digest or summary of emails on either a daily occurrence, a weekly, or monthly, so that you aren't just constantly getting these single email notices. You can get them all. The system will put them together and send it to you once a day, once a week, or a month. It actually does that. Be able to emphasize, you won't get a glut of emails.
Yeah, and I think that's standard that folks will understand,
I
right?
don't think they're aware of that, but it's worth
Well, I don't think people are aware of the current system, because the current system is like, what is it, where do I log in, where do I go, who am I, what do I do? But I think if we have like a modern streamlined interface, that folks generally get it. I'm an optimist.
I love it. We have a diverse demographic.
Well, but that's why I think the paper communication as well, and you do a one-pager that explains it. And look, maybe there's some folks in town that it is confusing for, and we use this sort of like the SSL hours or some volunteers of like, hey, you need some help signing up for the newsletter? You know, I'm sure there's plenty of folks in town who are, you know, more comfortable maybe with paper than digital, and we ought to be able to like help onboard them.
Dan, what's your timing? Or are you that far along?
I think 2023. Gonna follow the same course of the sidewalks.
Well, I was thinking
Just like
about outreach for the census because last month there was a discussion of making sure, trying to encourage people to return their postcards. And I was thinking if the town wanted to do any outreach related to the postcards for the census, we could.
Yeah, so attached to that same
combine
thing.
messaging.
Yeah.
Because it benefits the town to be counted
Yes.
as far as census, right?
I mean, Dan DeVise, who's the liaison for that committee, or the leader of that committee, is active and participatory and engaged. So I think this is, I mean, Mayor Becky, would you agree that I think this is sort of a Q1 2020, like this will get a focus in the first half of the year. I mean, I would imagine by, if we're serious about it, I don't see it needs to drag on past the spring. But it's really where is it going to rank in your priorities with, because it's going to require the town office staff to participate.
So I wasn't sure if you meant that we would have a plan, communication, outreach plan strategy by Q1, and I guess you mean calendar Q1, not fiscal year. Or if you think that we actually would have something already underway, getting executed, implemented. Your question was.
Yeah, so I think it would be like planned and ready to roll in Q1 and then done in Q2. In other words, this is not thousands of hours of work. This is just a decision of when are the resources available and when do the people who have committed to work on it decide to do it. That was the only reason it drags on and takes a long time is because no one's doing anything. Whereas some projects are hundreds and hundreds of hours. So I would think that if we're serious about it as a town and as the advisory committee, and I think folks are, if we can't do it the first half of next year. So that's how I come up with that. With the caveat that I respect where Andrea's, ranking of her resources and plans are, but that's what I think for us, if we allocated, whatever, probably $500, $800 to some, what I would think of as a small amount of money to some contractor work, we could get it knocked out. We just put it on to page 9 of Andrea's to-do list, then we have to be realistic and say that's not fair for her. And if we want it done, we put some money behind some hours, we'll get it done.
So I will answer your question by saying I'll defer to you and the committee on how they think they can get this done on the timeline, on a realistic timeline. So, I certainly appreciate you being the liaison and kind of spearheading, pushing, encouraging, coordinating. Because I think, last year, because this advisory committee started, I think, last September or October. So we're a year into it, and, there were, people that were traveling, out of town a lot, the committee. So it's really also dependent on making sure that the committee can stick to the schedule and then get the implementation plan, so to speak, not just strategy, but plan, because it will take resources, it'll take some money, we're gonna need some, IT work done on the back end of the system, and so there's a lot to coordinate. like you said, it's not difficult, but there's a lot of parts, so
Yeah.
I defer to you.
And it's sort of a council question of, my view would be, this is not a great initiative for all volunteers. So I think if we leave it in the volunteer, kind of unfunded, no accountable thing, which is fine, we do a lot of great stuff, happens over time in a town like that, and it works for a lot of things. If we want to get this done in a reasonable amount of time, if we put some money to it, like if we hired a couple of contractors to work on this, it would just get done, and those contractors could also, we could tee up the interns and some sort of free labor and SSL hours. This is, you could be done with this project, start to finish, including planning and da-da-da, 110 days. I mean, and I'm saying like by giving people time to respond and
Without weather delays or anything.
no force majeure. And so I like that as a use of town funds sometimes to say, hey, let's just get this thing done, so it's done, efficient, and communication, I think we all feel is part of a healthy community. So I'll work with the committee, but I'd love any feedback just in general, if my fellow council members potentially like that approach. Because if so, then I can work with them to be saying, hey, let's figure out what we think those resources are. Come back to the council with a proposal.
I think the resource, for my, Southampton, getting a picture of the resources necessary is the most important next step.
Okay.
But I like the philosophy of how you want to approach it. To simplify it as one less serve, one more that, so that we don't take a lot of this. But server space with multiple systems compete in some instances.
Great. Okay. I'll work on that with the committee and come back with a proposal. Thoughts, Jeremy, or
That sounds good.
Great, that will really make a difference,
Got it.
Dan, thank you. Okay, we have Stormwater Task Force, comments?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't make the last meeting of the Stormwater Task Force, which was a field walk of the stormwater system, or the stormwater problem at the base of Rokeby and Kenilworth. And the feedback I got from several people on this, the takeaway, sort of consensus issues were that if you think of this stretch, you've got the outfall where we currently lose control of the water. That's the land of Calajon, Whiteside property, also to the bays. And then there's a crosswalk, a bike path or crosswalk pedestrian access across at the end of Rokeby. So that's the upper stretch. And then there's a middle stretch, which is from Rokeby and the crosswalk to a junction box where water is collected from two main sewers on the street of Rokeby Street on the other side, on the estate side. And the takeaway in looking at it is that what happens in a big storm is that the water that feeds from Rokeby on the other side of town overwhelms that system, that box. And then in fact, the water that comes down that the town is trying to manage is pushed back out and causes flooding. It eddies down, and then it's surface water. So if you look at it that way, the takeaway was that in the case of the water that's coming off Rokeby in the state side is really a county problem, and the county ought to come up to grips with it to look at it and do an engineering study. That's not study. And then engineer a solution to that problem and manage that water from that junction box down to where the water feeds under the railroad tracks. The second piece concludes, so they said we need to get the county working with us to take, and more importantly, have the county take responsibility for the cost and for the implementation of a solution there. The section where the bike trail is or the crosswalk is was repaired by the county last July, I believe it was, maybe it was August. The solution has worked. So the consensus seems to be, the task force seems to be that we leave that alone because it's not now causing a problem. but we should keep an eye on it so that if it should become a problem, it can be addressed. Then the upstream side, which is from the bike trail to essentially to the outfall, which is all between Garrett Park and the Parkside, I'm sorry, the Garrett Park Estates backyards. That we minimize the washout, which has been most severe along there, by putting riprapping in there. The apparent consensus among the nearby residents is they want to minimize the intrusion meaning anything the town does, anything an engineering firm does, or a contractor does, to change the landscape or to take the trees out or to do any of those kinds of things. So we need to make sure that we come up with a task list or a to-do list or suggestions or considerations that we prepared for the engineering firm so that they can review and revisit what the two solutions that they proposed and make sure that the local residents' considerations are weighed. But the most important thing is that the problem is ameliorated and we get control of the flood waters that come down in the rain. That's the summary. Chuck, when I talked to Chuck Berry, he said he would put a write-up together and take it to the next step. Oh, and then my next piece is...
Wait, is there anybody, any discussion?
Well, I am curious what that next step is like.
Sorry?
What that next step,
The next step is to make sure that the task force gets together either online or in a meeting, probably online, and put together the identified problems we see that have not been dealt with, or the problem that the people living there do not want a topographic change. They don't want that trees removed. And so with that in mind, he may have to come up with a different solution. Or we will have to come up with a different solution from the trees given in town in two different versions so far. And that hopefully can be done in the next 2 months.
My apologies, Hans, I thought you were moving on to the next topic.
I was.
So that's why I said wait, but you had a question anyway. Okay. All right, thank you, Hans, that's really good. Thank you.
On the question of a traffic signal going up Strathmore, on the Knowles Hill, in talking to Jeff Wallstreich's office, his staff recommend that we get the whole delegation involved in supporting this. And apparently they're all supportive of it. And so the next logical step there is in order for them to understand what the issue is and to understand the layout of the road and the sightlines and the reasons why we think a flashing light will be useful, is to have them come here. And I said, well, why don't we wait until there is a delegation meeting that was scheduled until this morning, to the 16th of December. Now it's being renegotiated because some people can't make it. But if they're going to be here anyway, I have to have an open community meeting with all the neighborhoods that they represent, not just Garrett Park. If they could be here 20 minutes before that, we could walk in with them and talk and discuss so they can visualize what it is that we're after and solidify this support. So that's it.
So Hans, that's a great idea, it's a great idea. So December 4th is when we are going to have a public town hall meeting with District 18.
So that's what date's been confirmed.
Yes, and it's just an open public forum. So your idea of maybe getting them those to come out early and see what you're talking about is a good idea. I think it's set, it's either 7 or 7:30, Elizabeth, we know the exact time.
The earlier meeting is 7.
So I don't have that.
Kind of dark for a walk then.
What'd you say?
It's kind of dark for a walk on Strathmore then.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
All women make a point.
Could be.
Everybody wear
you
bright
get
clothes.
this, John, you get the card to flashlight, that leads us.
But, you know, Hans, if you think I mean, this is really coming up on a busy season for the legislators, so.
I'm not suggesting that we start any project now, I'm just suggesting that it would make sense. I said, I don't want to have to drive you just for this. In the case of Jeff, he lives down the street, so it's easy, but,
I got an idea. I don't know if it's gonna be sufficient for you, but the Delegate Solomon, Jared Solomon's office, they are still trying to coordinate with the other delegates to come out to look at Strathmore sidewalk. And they have proposed a few, and State Highway. And they have proposed a few dates, they haven't been able to lock in on them, but that's also in December. And that would happen in the afternoon. So when we get that firm, I'll be calling you right away, we'll call you right away, and see if we can get them to walk a little further.
20 minutes, half an hour is all we need.
Any other discussion with that? Okay. We are on to traffic and parking with Phil.
So we've basically finally come to the agreement with the county, so it looks like the only thing we need to do is Mark Elrich needs to sign the paperwork to allow us to start to enact, or start to enforce our traffic parking. And basically what it will do is this will authorize the mayor and or delegate, duly appointed delegate as the agent of the county to issue citations for violations. The county will administer the collection and of the, basically administer and adjudicate the collection of these tickets. And so one of the interesting things is that we'll have to, whoever writes the citation will have to be present if somebody requests a court date.
It's true.
So this is something that the parking committee needs to look into. But I would think we would probably start with this period of warning to tell people that, hey, we're now serious about this, so the next one may be a real one and we actually have to pay for it. But to start enforcing our parking regulations in areas where we've put up the signs, which have been up for quite a while. So we now have the ability, we will very shortly, if we have teeth, we'll actually have citation books will be provided by the county specifically for this use. So, great.
So here comes another question for council to be considering what resources we should devote for giving somebody the badge of honor to walk, to ticket. And if that is somebody outside town, we once had talked about this a year ago, briefly about possibility of a retired policeman or a meter maid or something like that.
Right.
Unless, there are volunteers in town.
So
You
it's
also had another idea from the MML from Ocean City.
So, well, that's a little separate from this. By the way, this runs for 5 years from the date it's signed, so we'll have to renew it again, or the town will have to renew it in 5 years if decide we're going to continue doing this. And so, I guess the other thing too is we're going to have to put a line in for income, because eventually we're going to get some type of income from this theoretically. May not be much, but we're not.
Sure.
We'll get some type of income from it. So the other thing, speaking of income, was the thought of charging for parking in and around Penn Place. Now, we can't necessarily, I don't believe we can charge for all the parking spots, because some of them, I believe, and I need to look this up, have to be provided where the old CSX station used to be as part of the agreement for the MARC train stopping here.
I think it's 11 or 18 spaces, one or two, it's actually their property.
Right, it is their property.
They're parking on their property, and they control those spaces.
Yeah,
And so how do you determine who are the commuters that are parking where in the lot? And if there are, let's say, 18 spaces that are by rule or by property, belong, if they by rule or by property determination belong to CSX, do we then owe CSX those 18 spaces somewhere in that area, even if it isn't on their property? This gets to be really.
it's something to look into right now. It's a look into sort of thing that we would look at, because I had heard 17, but 17, 18 either way, but yeah. Either way, definitely, yeah, the CSX where the footprint is, yeah.
Do you remember what the citation fee is, penalty? In some places, do you remember, was it 60?
Something like that, I think.
And then the county gets 25% of that?
Right. Yeah, 25% is the rate, the county shall retain 25% of all fines collected. So, yep,
Thank you. Anybody
any
more?
questions?
I have a question. So do we have a communication plan for notifying residents that this is becoming effective?
No, so I have to ask, I'll have to ask Mr. Dan to put it out, otherwise we would put it out on all our listservs, plus that would be the other reason for having a warning period, so that
Right.
those who park will now know that it's coming.
Do we have an idea of how soon we're
I-
getting this into effect?
I would think not until the first of the year, somewhere in that neighborhood, because I mean, we still need to get the committee together to decide some stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a valid question, Jerry Lee, but I think what's going to be a critical piece to this is who's going to be the issuing officer. I mean, if we're saying we're going to be enforcing, but we haven't done any, we don't have anybody,
Right.
I don't want to get, residents and,
Oh, absolutely.
non-residents all up in a stir.
Well, I think we'll need to put together a whole plan and basically figure out what we're gonna do first, and then we'll shoot out to everybody, get their comments, and at that point, we would then be able to set some official dates. So I don't see it as, I don't have time definite as to when it's gonna be done.
Andrea and I were talking about whether some of the other local towns who have police force or who may be, following, parking restrictions and so forth, if they have somebody that there's a way to kind of work out some shared service. So that's another way that's just another place to tap, to see what's there.
Be nice to have our own police officer in town.
We did, one time,
Really?
Oh, yeah.
yes,
Long time
a
ago.
long time ago.
Talk about a jail.
Yeah, that we can build a jail.
We can,
That the council can appropriate funds for us to have a town jail. It's in the charter, you're right.
Good, my kids are teenagers now, so they'll.
Be the
I would
first,
imagine they could give that place some business at some point.
thank you, Phil.
you're welcome.
And
So,
anything new, well.
So as far as archives go, the town's record retention schedule and basically what we would intend to retain and so forth, and how we would do it, was sent to the state on the 30th for approval, because we need the state's approval in order to become our own recorder or retainer of records, to retain our own records, otherwise they have to go to the state, everything has to go to the state, so it's
So when was that?
October 30th. And the thought is it would probably take a couple of months for them to
Stand.
get back to us. I don't think there's going to be a problem. Our archivist Claire did a top to bottom collections assessment. We have 116 separate collections, 50% of which are official town records and the other 50 are private collections, such as items donated by the town residents or citizen-run clubs and organizations. And she's currently working to create research tools to make it easier to find collections. And for instance, they've already started to do some finding aids on things like Penn Place Town Hall, Newton Free Zone, Women's Club, and a few others, but eventually it'll get to the point where theoretically we should have just about all of it. Some way of being able to easily access it or at least find it. And one of the volunteers is working on a guide for the researching houses and property in town. In addition, got a nice donation from the Historic Preservation Committee, which donated the proceeds of the house tour, which was happening back in the summer. That was the one with the over on Weymouth, the Richter houses. So that's going to be used to help transcribe professionally some oral histories that we have on tape right now. And there's some cool stuff in there. I liked did a transcription of one of the former mayors who was a World War II. He was a World War II bomber pilot. That was actually kind of interesting.
And this is the only one that survived, that was cool.
Yeah. And not all of them survived. He lost an arm in the process, as I recall.
Phil or Andrea, has there been any further effort to try to get the archives database up on the internet or on the web so that residents can actually try to do searching?
Next step is to do that.
Okay, so it hasn't been forgotten, but
It's in process, but it's not done.
kind of,
I think part of the logic was she wanted to have the finding aids built first so that people sort of know what we have available, what to even look for, and then get the information
Right.
accessible.
our former archivist was working on it. So. Cool. Okay, that's great. And there's no other discussion. We have town manager's report from Andrea.
Nothing different from what's in the written report. The total revenues, operations, and capital budgets are at expected levels. The total revenues and expenses are within projections. There were no town building permits issued last month. And town office and maintenance, it's been a busy month. We're completing some IT projects, working on code violations still. There's a court date actually tomorrow morning for one of the homes. On the insurance front, still waiting to receive reimbursement from CSX for them to clean up the tree debris, and then for the replacement of now 2 light poles on Knowles Avenue. And then just busy with the sidewalk project.
Any questions, discussion over here? Okay, thank you.
Everybody, meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Grant.